Well, gang, it's 10 o'clock. Can folks hear me okay?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Oh, good. Because so far I'm hearing those of you in the room, which is great. We'll see how that goes. What's that?
Kit Kat.
Yeah, oh, I know. And Kathy's going to help me. She's going to be my co-facilitator because I won't always see or hear what everyone in the room is saying, especially when we're in our bad habit of talking over each other as we love to do. So anyway, thanks everyone for being here. Ryan, should I mark down who's present or what's the best way to do that?
Yes, that would probably be the best way to go.
Okay.
Call the roll.
Okay, I'll do that. Our chair, John Hamrick, I believe is on vacation. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So we have Carol Dunn here and Doug Cohn. And you guys maybe raise your hands maybe when I call your name for those on the camera. And then I'll just say Carol's name again. So folks that are on Zoom like I am can see who's who. Although you might not see them the way the cameras work on the owl devices.
They're voice activated.
Exactly. You could say hi and raise your hand. Okay. So we have Doug, Carol, Doug, Kirk Souther's there, right?
Yep, I'm here.
All right. Thanks. And I'm here in Ogden, Utah. And Kathy Worthington is here. So there's the roll call. So I'll just say yeah, I should say who else is in the room that I can't see. Steve Andrews is here.
John V. Hill's also here.
And John V. Hill, great, thanks. Anyone else that I've missed? Okay. And Steve Andrews, just for Leslie and Steve Whitaker's benefit, Steve Andrews has been heavily involved in this issue for years, like some of us. He's not an official member of the committee because he lives outside of Canyon City, but he's often at our meetings and helping us with a lot of things, including presenting some of the work he's done as a retired energy consultant. And then John V. Hill. John, say your, I forget your exact work title with Black Hills Energy. Can you say what that is?
I'm a community affairs manager.
Community Affairs Manager, thanks. I should know that by now, right?
That's all right, I'm pretty forgetful.
Yes, you are. You're kind. I don't believe we have any old business, but I wanted to stick it on the agenda in case there's something I missed. Is there anything anyone has for old business? I don't hear anything. So before I turn it over to Leslie Glustrom and Steve Whitaker, I wanted to say I was exploring potential folks to talk with us about Kit Carson Electric in the Taos area, New Mexico. And through connections with several people, I was connected with Leslie, and then Leslie's connected to Steve Whitaker. But Leslie and I had a great talk on the phone last week. She, and I'll let her tell because she'll do it better than I can, tell her background and her connection with the electric utility industry and what she's been doing for years, and particularly involved with Xcel Energy. But what we're going to talk about today is really an update in regard to the potential for community choice energy in Colorado. And I'll just say briefly, as committee members know, we had a presentation, it was about 11 months ago, on community choice energy, and talked a little bit about what the concept was and the fact that the Public Utilities Commission would be doing a study during this year that's due to be reported out by the middle of December of this year. And I thought it would be a good time, given all that we've been looking at as a committee in terms of what are the options in Colorado, whether it's, municipalizing or other kinds of options. I thought it would be a good time to go back and revisit the issue of community choice energy. So really happy that Leslie could be here with us and Steve Whitaker could be here. So I'm going to turn it over to Leslie to kind of just give us a little bit, not only of her own background and her work regarding rate cases with Excel and other things, but just bring us more up to date with community choice energy and how this might be an option in Colorado in the future. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Leslie, and you can let us know if you prefer to wait until the end of what you're going to say for questions, or if you want to take them as you go along, that kind of thing.
Thanks so much, Councilwoman Tracy. And I'm joined today by Steve Whitaker, who you'll hear more from in just a minute. And I just really want to thank the committee. I reviewed some of your reports and the PowerPoint you did, and you've all done a lot of work. So I really want to thank you for that. I'm going to share my screen here in a second, and we'll take it from there. And my goal today really is to talk a little bit about community choice energy, why we're very confident it could work in Colorado, but it can't work until we get enabling legislation. So we'll talk a little bit about all of that, but I want to thank you so much both for this opportunity and also for the incredible amount of work you've all done. I'm really super impressed. So let's see what we can find here. Always takes just a minute.
Zoom always makes it a little challenging to find
Yeah,
what you
but
want.
I had it all set up, but now it's found it. So
Okay.
give me 1 second and it'll come. And as some of you know, there's some quirks in Zoom where sometimes your PowerPoint gets, it just won't advance and things like that. But we will make it work one way or another from the beginning. There, I'm hoping the folks in the room can see that. I'm not quite sure about your setup. Is that?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Great.
Okay, very, very good. My name and contact information is at the bottom, but Councilwoman Tracy definitely knows how to reach me, and also Steve Whitaker. And by background, I'm a biochemist by training, but I was thinking about this morning, I grew up with, my dad was a Republican businessman and I adored my dad. He's now passed away. Had just a massive amount of respect for him and learned so much and kind of grew up with that kind of thinking. And my mom came from a long line of shopkeepers and she was also very entrepreneurial. So my goal in community choice energy is primarily around price and competition and innovation and kind of giving communities a choice. They may or may not want to take that choice, that's fine, but just having the choice strengthens your hand when you're dealing with a utility like Black Hills, or in our case, Xcel. And so I wanted to take just a minute to ask Steve Whitaker to introduce himself, and he will be kind of chiming in whenever he thinks it's useful. Steve and I, as you'll soon see, we've worked together for a long time. So I think it'll be awesome to have him. Steve, if you wouldn't mind.
Great, thank you, Leslie.
Words about yourself.
So, I've my career has been, originally in science and research. I worked for a couple national laboratories, the last of which became the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Golden. And after that, I entered the private sector and worked for 4 startups, was a co-founder of 2 and CEO of the last one that I worked with, which was an electronic manufacturing company. Our success was entirely based on the ability to compete in an open marketplace. It not only brought us success, but also allowed us to bring new products and services to a customer base that had not seen a product like the ones that we were able to introduce. And in doing so, it expanded not only the marketplace for our particular product, but also challenged others within that marketplace to be better at what they did. So the competition not only allows us to be in the marketplace, where if there were no, if it was a closed market, there would be no reason to be an entrepreneur in that marketplace. So we were able to bring goods and services into the marketplace because it was competitive. So I think that's enough for now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Steve. And just in terms of the folks that are here, we're a small group today. So if you have questions, don't shy. This is, as I see it, relatively informal, and we're small groups. So don't be shy, just jump in and somebody will make sure that you, can be heard or stop us or whatever as we go. The first slide provides just a little bit, just sort of the first introduction to community choice energy. I think you've taken a look at this as part of your very frankly exhaustive review of the utility industry and the main options that we wish we could have. But under community choice energy, the main point is that on the left side of the slide in the green, the community has a chance to choose the source, the provider of their electricity. It'll be delivered almost always in some manner by the current transmission and distribution system, which will probably be owned and controlled by your current utility provider. That transmission distribution system is often referred to as the natural monopoly. It doesn't make sense to have 10 sets of wires. So let's have one set of wires, but let's give some choice about who provides the electricity. And in theory, that should be your largest source of cost. It doesn't always work out that way, but in terms of rates and prices, having that competition that Steve talked about on the generation of electricity should bring some, price discipline to the market. And then, of course, all of that comes to you. We might talk a little bit about, I'm a big fan of trying to make our grids smaller and more self-contained, something called microgrids, because the extreme weather is frankly going to keep getting more extreme as we see, having just finished one hurricane out east, or not quite finished, but and another one aiming for Florida this weekend. And we all know what's happened in Colorado between the fires and the floods and the bomb cyclones and everything else. So I actually see kind of a different vision of the future, but the first step is to try to provide some choice around this first step. Who's generating your electricity and who, how can we bring some competition into that part of the system? And I'll pause a little bit after each slide. This is just the beginning. We're going to come back to this and elaborate some more. Steve and I work with a number of groups in various capacities. I've listed a few at the bottom. I do this work originally because of climate change. I'll be honest, I'm a mom and I'm profoundly concerned about what the world will look like for my children and grandchildren and on down, and how livable it'll be. But as part of doing that work, I've come to really see up close and personal what happens when you have a monopoly. And since I grew up in a household where business talk and competition and markets and trading and all of that were part of the dinner conversation every night, that's now become a primary focus of mine, and I think of Steve's. Emily, I just want to be really clear. I am from Boulder, and, people think everybody in Boulder is super rich, and there are some rich people here. I don't know very many of them, and I don't work with any of them. This is one picture of the team. It's now from 2011, but you can see Steve was there back then. Sam Weaver became our mayor. Tom Asprey did an amazing set of modeling for us back over 10 years ago to show us that, yep, we could have more renewables and have a lower price if we had competition. Allison's been at this forever. None of these, there's one person in sort of 1.5 people in this picture that have more money than most people, but they don't have that much. And the rest of us are like retired teachers and things like that. So I don't want you to think that, it's a bunch of rich folks in Boulder, because that's not who did this work. And this is a slightly more recent picture. And I just wanted to point out Julie Zahniser, retired speech therapist, who has been central to our campaigns. Julie isn't here today, but you would love her very much. And, she's a retired speech therapist. $50 is a big deal to her. And yet she coordinated 2 campaigns where Xcel spent $1 million each in order to defeat us. And we won. And I give the whole team a lot of credit, but Julie's the one who kept the team together. So she's amazing. You'll perhaps get to know her at some point. I didn't want to forget, what are the next action steps? So I put them up near the top. The most important one is there will be a public hearing on October 18th. My memory is at 4 o'clock. I should have written that down, but it's late in the afternoon. I'm pretty sure it's 4. We'll send out more notices. It's very important that the Public Utilities Commission hear, and especially hear from communities served by Black Hills, that we need choice. I mean, maybe you don't want choice, but if you do want choice, it's very important. Again, whether a community exercises that choice or not is a completely different question to be handled down the road. But I and Steve and all the people we work with believe strongly that just having the choice strengthens your hand when you're dealing with a monopoly. And so if you can mark that on your calendar, October 18th, let's call it 4 p.m. I'm pretty sure that's right. And we would be so grateful for as many people as possible. And I know Steve Andrews and I go back a long way. So Steve, if you can carry this message to the Pueblo gang and everybody else you're working with, a strong showing from Black Hills is going to make all the difference in the world. We're going to have Boulder folks there, but you know, it's Boulder, right? People think, well, they're just stupid Boulder folks. So very important to have a lot of folks in the Black Hills territory. This fall, because there is that PUC report coming at the end of the year, I know you've heard a little bit about that. On December 15th, we'll get the report from the Utilities Commission. But if we want to run legislation in 2023, we need to be active now developing that. That's happening as we speak, quite literally. The guys doing our first draft is working on it. And we would love to have your input. Now it's sausage making, so that means everybody gets their input and then you're never quite sure what's going to come out the back end. But it'll be a long iterative process, and we would love if any or all of you want to be engaged. We would be very grateful for your help in thinking about it. How could we set up this system in a way that's actually going to work? And we've given a lot of thought, but we will give it more. And in the meantime, we'll be grateful if you're interested in choice, competition, unleashing innovation, the reasons that I'm doing this. Every piece of outreach you can do is very important because people kind of don't know this option could be possible. They don't understand why it could be useful. And in particular, we need our elected officials, particularly your state legislators, you know, depending on the outcome of the election down in your area. But we really need them to at least be, hear from it from their constituents. So we'll stay in touch, but hoping that you'll make plans to kind of have those conversations. Please think about how you and those you know might be able to pass the word. And I always say, talk to the clerks in the store. You never know who knows who and how it's going to work. So don't just talk to everybody. And I want to make sure I say this, and I'll probably say it a few times. I do a lot of work with Xcel. I work with a lot of Xcel people. The things I say about a monopoly are in no way ever meant to reflect on the people who work for Xcel. I think Kathy's on the phone, right? Folks who work for Xcel are really good people. I sincerely like them. I respect them. They're really competent. They're hardworking. They're kind. They're decent. It's nothing about the people. It's just that when you work for a monopoly, it's kind of, imperative that you defend the monopoly. That's kind of part of the system. But the people are great, and I have really enjoyed working with virtually all of them. There are a couple, but mostly they're really great people. And I don't know the Black Hills people, but John is here and all, and these are good people. But it's the question of the structure that we're working under. By way of background, I do a lot of work with Clean Energy Action. Just put this up to let you know that while I do a lot of work in Boulder, that was actually a small percentage of what I do. I work with communities all around Colorado. A selection of them is there in that box in the lower left, as well as with citizen groups pretty much all over the country. If we updated this map, it would be almost all blue for states where we have worked and what I called inspired, trained, and supported activists to help us build what I call a 21st century electric system, a system that will work in this century, which is going to be a very different century than the century that, frankly, most of us grew up in. So each one of those states is a story. They're all good stories, amazing people. Know that you're not alone in getting up close and personal with the electrical industry and getting, down in the weeds with it as you have been doing. Again, by way of background, we've had 8 elections in Boulder. We won 7 of them. We lost the one in 2020. It was the middle of the pandemic. The vaccines weren't here yet. We were afraid to knock doors, which is how we usually get the word out. We had one guy who took a pair of salad tongs and went out to the park and was handing out flyers with salad tongs. But the rest of us, we tried to do it by Zoom. And yeah, bless Brad Siegel. He was amazing who did the salad tong work. But we're really proud of what we did. And we're really proud, frankly, even though the 2020 election we didn't win, staying on your feet for 10 years in a municipalization battle with Xcel was a big deal. It was a lot of work. And we are really, frankly, proud. And most of us got started because of climate and trying to address electric utility emissions of carbon, which were the largest source of carbon dioxide when we began. And this is an analysis from the most recent settlement agreement for Xcel at the Utilities Commission. You can see, and this is done by Xcel, they're on track for an 85% carbon reduction by 2030. I believe that we won on decarbonization. Now, we'd like to speed this up. We say the pace is too slow, and importantly, the price is too high. So that's why we continue this work. But frankly, I'm just, and I'm not a real kind of person that goes around being proud. I'm just so proud of our team because none of us got paid. We all just did it as volunteers. And I believe we won because Xcel had no intention of doing this when we began, believe me. This is your situation. I don't need to remind you of this. You've seen this over and over again, but I just wanted to have it in front of us. Your rates are a lot higher than Xcel's. And while Xcel's look great compared to, oops, sorry about that. Oh, yeah, where am I? This is the PowerPoint glitch on Zoom. While Xcel's rates look good compared to yours, they're still way too high for reasons that I'm going to explain. And so I don't encourage you to jump out of the frying pan and into the fire and to be served by Xcel, because although it would be better than Black Hills perhaps on a rate issue, there are many reasons I think that there could, and I'm going to explain those to you in a minute. We can do much, much better than this. And that's why competition, unleashing market forces, unleashing innovation are so important. And that's not going to be easy, but ultimately, and I say it for Xcel, Xcel is welcome to compete, but not to monopolize. And the same goes for Black Hills. Welcome to compete. If we have competition, you don't have to go away. You're still going to be serving a lot of people, but you will have to learn how to compete. And that's a new skill for companies that have been monopolies typically for a century or so, sometimes longer. Let me just pause. And obviously, you know how your election turned out. So you can be pretty confident that your community is looking for, and this is the way I interpret it, what was offered to them in the franchise is not what they are looking for, generally speaking. So another reason why I think choice is so important. And again, nothing will compel communities to take this choice. It's just an option. And every community will look at it and decide, yes, we think we want to try the choice, or no, we just want to stick with, the company we have. Obviously, this is the monopoly thing. And I think I may be dating myself, but maybe I'm not the only one that spent a lot of summer afternoons playing Monopoly. I had two older brothers, and, it was back then, it always felt kind of good to make the Monopoly and charge somebody $1 gazillion for landing on, one of the blue properties with a hotel on it or whatever. But it's, monopolies have a certain logic, and that logic is to remain a monopoly. And when you're a monopoly, you don't have any price discipline. So if we were in a small, I would probably ask you to raise hands if you played Monopoly, but because I'm not quite sure whether this means anything, but I have so many memories of it. And when I look back, I realize, oh yeah, it's fun to be a Monopoly. It's just not so good for everybody else. This is the kind of a redo of that slide that we did. I think rather than re-say it, I think I just want to pause here. I've got a few more slides because I want to explain why we are very confident that choice can work. And somebody has their hand up, and I would love to let that go forth.
Yes, Leslie, this is Doug Cohen. I would like to ask you a few things. Towards the beginning of your conversation, you said it could or should work. You also, do I understand you're working with Taos right now or Santa Fe?
Not worth. Wrong utility.
Nobody?
That's the next topic.
That's the next.
Oh,
Our
okay,
next-
okay.
Next.
But you said it could or should work. How confident are you that this will work?
Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate that, Doug. Good questions. And I'm leaning in because somehow the sound isn't coming through very clearly for me. So yeah, excellent question. It's the future, Doug. And as they say, there are no facts in the future. So I try to be careful about you know, I did the same thing as a mother. I never tried to say this will happen because you never know, right? The hurricane might come through or the fire or whatever, you know, and whatever your plans were are upended. But I am extremely confident that it can work in Colorado. A lot of it will depend on how the enabling legislation is written and what we might be able to get put into law by getting it through the legislature. And there are, you know, 99 reasons why or 100 reasons why that's a good question than the governor, although I think the governor is, you know, he's a market force kind of guy. So I am very confident. I'm about to explain why that is. It took a little while for community choice to get going in California. One of my last slides, I'll show you how it has since taken off, because after our first couple of communities demonstrated what it was and how to do it, and it's just being taken off, I hate to say this, like wildfire. And so I am very, very confident, but, you know, if World War III breaks out, which, you know, is possible these days, then, you know, it's not going to work out because we're all going to be distracted with other things. So I am extremely confident that it can work. And again, no community has to go down this path if after taking a harder and closer look, they like, oh no, I want to stay with, in your case, I want to stay with Black Hills because the devil I know is better than the devil I don't know kind of thinking. So I'm extremely confident, and I'm about to explain why that is, but I welcome your questions as we go forth.
Okay, I have another one. How far out do you expect a reliable alternate energy source to be available?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Doug. And again, I think I might answer that about, you know, a reliable alternate energy source. When I began this, Xcel was like, we can't put 10% renewable electricity on our system because we can't control it. And back in 2004, we ran a statewide ballot measure, Amendment 37. Coloradans voted for it in the same year that we re-elected President Bush. So to me, these questions are not partisan questions. They're much more economic questions. And obviously reliability is top of mind for everyone. You know, it's your first and last and middle priority, right? But I would argue that our current system is not that reliable. You might know how many times Pueblo Unit 3, the big coal plant in Pueblo, which Xcel calls Comanche 3, how many times that's gone offline, and it goes offline with less than 10 minutes of notice. That's a big deal when you lose a 750, almost 800 megawatt resource in 10 minutes. That's a really big deal, and it's happened a lot over and over and over again. So reliability is a complex question, but I will say that Xcel, I just showed you the slide with Xcel on their way to 85% renewable electricity by 2030. Believe me, Xcel would never commit to that if they weren't as sure as they can be that they can run a reliable system on a mix of wind, solar, battery storage, and at this point with some natural gas backup. So getting to that last 10 to 15% is hard. I always say if you have a 5-day blizzard, you know, there's no wind, there's no solar. So you've got to have something until we build more flexible demand and better storage. That last 10 to 15, or have hydrogen, or who knows what it's going to be. That last 10 to 15% is going to be hard. But I am very confident about getting to that 80 and even now 85, because Xcel has modeled it. And if they saw any problems, believe me, you can be over 100% sure Xcel would have pushed back and said, we can't do 85% because there's too many holes in that combination of wind, solar, and batteries and natural gas that we're now proposing. So I hope that answers part of your question, Doug. And I'm happy to come back to it. But again, to look at Xcel, and to me, that's the answer. 100%, I don't know if I'll live long enough for that. I think I will, but you never know. But 85% is plenty good. But more importantly, right now, it's the price we're going to pay as we electrify, drive more electric cars and all of that. It's very important. And certainly, you know, the challenges of high prices there in Canyon City and all of Black Hills territory. It's a big problem for your residents. It's a big problem for your businesses. It's hard to attract new businesses into an area that has these high electric rates. And I'm actually now focused largely on rates. I've done a lot of work on rates over the last 20 years, and now I'm largely focused on that. And I'm happy to have follow-up questions either from Doug or from whoever wants.
Looks like we have one from Kathy.
Hi Leslie, this is Kathy Worthington.
Hey,
Hey, quick
Kathy.
question. When we're talking about, small use of natural gas going forward, what are your thoughts about this latest pieces, like say in the city of Denver and so forth, as far as trying to eliminate any new construction with natural gas and things that way?
Kathy, the sound system is really bad when it comes to, but I think you asked me, but I might have it completely wrong. I think you asked me what I thought about not allowing natural gas to new like home construction and things like that. Is that your question?
Correct, yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good question. Sort of different because now we're talking about natural gas for heating, right? Primarily in homes and businesses. And we're talking about new construction. My expertise is in electric utilities. And I believe until we get better demand flexibility, longer term storage, and maybe alternatives like hydrogen, that last 10 to 15%, I believe we need to keep natural gas back up around. Is that another 5 years, 10 years, 15? That's a little hard to tell. But I definitely understand that we don't want to say, well, we got a 5-day blizzard, so we'll turn your lights back on in 5 days. That's not a solution I'm interested in. The question about natural gas for heating is a different question. And new construction, I think, is an especially important question. I think I might say, Kathy, that I would start with what we might call a rebuttable presumption against gas hookups to new construction. We know we can do new construction without relying on natural gas. We know natural gas is non-renewable. Putting aside methane and the global warming potential and how severe that is and all, I don't think it's wise to plan a future on non-renewable fuels. Now, existing buildings is a completely different question because we all know it's going to be difficult and expensive. But new construction, if a builder could make a case, listen, there's a good reason why there should be natural gas here. And we recognize that we already have, gas supply constraints, right? And you can blame it on permitting, but the truth is it's non-renewable. And if you study the well records and everything, we've just depleted the easily accessible stuff. And so I think I would come down with a rebuttable presumption against gas hookups to new buildings. But I recognize that it's complex and I would want to provide that opportunity for a builder to say, listen, the only way to do this building is with natural gas. And then, the local, building folks would take a look and say, okay, yeah, you're right. Let's do natural gas here, but let's try to move away from non-renewable fuels.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. Great question.
So I'm sure you're aware of what just happened in California.
Yeah.
PG&E or the PG&E didn't, but the legislature has agreed to keep Diablo online for 5 more years when they thought they were going to close it down. They're advertising, don't plug in your cars and such. And so that's why I asked the question about reliability.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question. Mm-hmm.
And do you see, how far down the road do you see that?
Yeah, no, it's, Doug, it's a great question. And I will say that we can't do 100% renewable today. We can't do it next year. I'm not convinced that we can get to 100% renewable by 2030. By 2035, from what I know from the long duration storage that's coming from hydrogen development and from using artificial intelligence and computers to help us match demand more. But I will say, Doug, that, this is not a choice. This is an imperative. You can't run a country on non-renewable fuels forever. And I happen to know a whole lot about coal and coal supply, and I happen to know a fair bit about what's going on in oil and gas. And, there is oil and gas left in the ground, but it has often been the case that it costs more to produce it than you can sell it for. That's not a profitable adventure. And either way, the planet's not making any more fossil fuels. So it's imperative, putting aside climate change and everything else, that we make this transition. Now, we built this whole country, the whole United States was built to run on fossil fuels. And so we are like, oh no, we have an energy crisis. But with any amount of thought, you can say, we were going to get to this energy crisis one way or another, because if you build your entire economy run off at what I call an inheritance, if you've been living on an inheritance and spending it like crazy, at some point you're going to have a financial crisis, because all of a sudden now you have to live off what you can earn from your regular job. And that's very different than living off an inheritance. So, Doug, I can't answer your question with any certainty. I can say with certainty, we can't run at 100% renewable now. We can get up in the 70 to 80%, and that's the range that I have advocated for a long time, recognizing that the last 10 to 20% will be very difficult. And it's also true that it's a transition. And anytime you're moving and it's complex, you know, just that from maybe moving houses, like you think you're going to close on this day, but you don't get to close till that day. And now you got to live somewhere else or get a short-term rental or, you know, whatever. And perhaps you've been through that. And as a whole country, we're going through that transition now. So there's going to be, you know, a couple steps forward, a couple steps back. But it's inevitable and imperative that we move beyond non-renewable fuels. You can't, no amount of politics, no president, no priest, no anybody can change the amount of fossil fuels. And nobody's making, the planet's not making more of them on any time scale that matters. So if we want our economy to work, we've got to move forward. And it's a very doable challenge, especially up to 70 to 80%. And the last 20% is fascinating and a great, I mean, when you talk to the next generation, they're like, oh yeah, I know how to make artificial intelligence match demand to the grid. And we've got some great folks working on that. I'm very excited about it, but it'll take a while. But let's get to 70 to 80%. By the time we get there, we'll be able to go to 83 or 85 or 87. And then, you know, we'll just see about, you know, I'm not young, so I don't know if I'll live to see 100, but I don't need to live to see 100.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great questions. I appreciate them for sure. Any questions about this slide? I think you all kind of generally understand community choice. And again, you know, for Doug and Kathy and other folks, any community that doesn't want to have a choice, you don't have to exercise the choice. But just having the choice will strengthen your hand as you think about rate issues in your discussions with Black Hills or whoever. This is just another slide that kind of re-summarizes it. I think you know this. Currently, you're under the system on the left with all the red blocks. Everything's done by the investor-owned utility, in your case, Black Hills. They provide the power, they deliver the power, and then they bill you and all. Under CCE, that first step, a community would have a choice on who would provide their power. And that's done with, you know, frankly, a very complex negotiation. The middle step, the investor-owned utility will very likely own and maintain the power lines. Although, again, I think there's a lot to be said for thinking about a different configuration where we have much smaller grids that can stay up and running when we have the next fire or flood or whatever, all things that Canyon City has experience with and other communities. And I would say that this last box, the IOU provides customer service. I actually think that should be kind of a marbled box where there's some part done by the IOU and some part done by the local energy authority. I think you've taken a look at municipalization, which is all kind of brown boxes. We all know that's, even I was very much a muni skeptic. There's one woman who's advocating, I'm like, Allison, we can't do that. That'll be crazy. That is so much brain damage. Don't you know that'll never work? And finally, when Xcel refused to consider anything else, I said, all right, we'll do it. But, you know, this is really a lot of work and a lot of brain damage. But this CCE option is kind of in the middle. Sometimes it's called Muni Light. So any questions about that? And how this will actually work will depend on how the enabling legislation is written. So, you know, and we'll be, you know, at some point we'll be talking to the utilities, probably not in the next few months, but this will be sausage making where everybody kind of has their say on it. I want to make sure that community choice is not confused with retail choice. I'll be honest, utilities, particularly my utility XL, often tries to kind of use, for example, Texas as an example. Oh, you don't want to be like Texas. And you're right, we don't want to be like Texas. There's a lot of reasons why we don't want to be like Texas. But one is that their retail choice, individuals make the decision. There probably isn't adequate planning for capacity. And it's kind of a zoo, and there's a tremendous amount what they call churn. What we're proposing is what's called wholesale community choice energy with the option for customers to opt out. They're given many opportunities, usually 3 or 4 opportunities. They're told this is what's going to happen if you want to opt out, do this. And then that's repeated several times. And, you know, 5–10% of customers like, yeah, whatever this crazy experiment is, I don't want part of it. But most people are like, I get it. I want this newer system, and there's lots of reasons for that. So I just want to make clear, because the utilities often try to scare communities with stories that are actually stories about retail choice, not about wholesale, what's called wholesale opt-out community choice. Let me pause. Steve, feel free to jump in anytime you see something I should be saying that I'm not. I want to talk just a little bit about Excel so you understand why, as an Excel customer, I'm so very interested in this. This is a slide from a PowerPoint that Excel gives to their investors. You can see that in 2021, Excel took $660 million in after-tax net income from Colorado. So while our rates are lower than yours, I'll show you another slide in a minute, they're still way too high. Their energy mix, you know, we're making progress. I remember the days when they told us we couldn't possibly put 10% renewable on the system because the grandmothers in Grand Junction will freeze, because it's not, we don't know, it's wind and solar. We never know when it's going to blow. So now they're up in the high 30% renewable, and that's, you know, great news. They're on their way to above 80% over the next, let's call it 7.5 years, something like that. So definitely moving in the right direction, but it's the price that has, and the cost, especially as we, in a sense, move virtually all of our energy use to electrification. And, you know, electric cars are much cheaper to fuel than gas cars, but I'm concerned about having a monopoly controlling the electricity in my house, the electricity for my car, and for those that, you know, going to heat with electricity. It's, you know what you're going through now, and you're just at the first step, which is the electricity that runs your lights and computers and refrigerators and all.
Leslie, looks like there's a hand in the room.
Great. Thanks, Emily.
Yeah.
Councilwoman.
Hi, Leslie, this is Carol Dunn. I did go back a couple of slides and I got this question, but I couldn't get my hand up quick enough. On that slide where it's talking about residential, community procures energy for all residents with opt-out right. What would people opt out to?
They would opt out to their current incumbent provider. So in your, it would be
essentially you're well, okay, maybe I'm not understanding. So you would have you'd have parallel systems in that case then? No?
Yes, they would. That middle part.
It's the billing, it's the billing procedure?
Sort of,
Okay.
where the power comes from.
It's
Right,
yes.
so, okay, so you'd say, I don't want my power to come from renewables, I want it all to come from gas?
No, no,
Okay, I'm really confused.
I want, Black Hills is A. I don't want Black Hills, I want B, based on cost or whatever it is that B offers.
Yeah,
So you'd buy from B. You either buy, if you opt out, you actually buy from A, Black Hills.
Right. But how do
Same.
you
Okay.
differentiate? Carol lives next door to me. She wants B, I want A.
Nope, this is a community, not individuals.
well, but this opt-out thing,
Yeah,
Yeah,
Oh.
that allows individuals.
This would be the city choosing, not the individual.
Leslie can clarify all that.
okay,
Yeah,
all right,
yeah,
so start over, Leslie, on that, I'm sorry to be confused.
No, Carol, I think it's an excellent question. I'm really glad you asked it. Thank you so much. I've gone back yet one more slide. And basically, individuals would have a choice between the left side, which is the investor-owned utility, in your case, Black Hills, or the middle slide, which would be community choice energy, which might be something like the Arkansas River, joint community authority or something like that, because you might join up with some other communities besides Canyon City. And you can see that in those choices, the last two boxes are both the same. The delivery and the customer interface. Now, I think that's going to evolve, but let's just stick with this for now. And the electric system is just one big mash of electrons, right? Right now, when you turn on the computers or your lights or whatever, it's a great big mash. And there is a way to track electrons, but generally we don't do it. And we just operate the system in a way that makes sure that electricity shows up at your house and at your neighbor's house. But when it comes to the billing, if you opted out, you would pay the price of the electricity of the supply that Black Hills determines. Whereas if your neighbor chooses to go into the community choice joint power authority, whatever it might be called, your neighbor would pay the price for the supply that entity is providing. And later and it's an excellent question, Carol. It's super glad you asked it. Later, I'll show the Marin Clean Energy, and their bill comes, now that your Black Hill bill comes with a lot of lines on it, right? There's, the PPCA and the ECA and the, GRSA and the blah, 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 all those endless adders, and they all have alphabet soup, and I understand a lot of it, but the vast majority of people don't have a blessed clue, right? And so the bill, in a sense, could have 3 lines on it, one for the supply, one for the delivery, and one for basically customer service, paying for all the people that answer the phones and prepare the bills and all that. And where it would differ is the price of the supply. And you'll see that when I show this slide from something called Marin Clean Energy. And you don't track electrons, but there's a big accounting system that says, okay, house A wants IOU, house B wants CCE, we'll charge them accordingly.
Yeah, I think that's important to say that even if there's enabling legislation, and even if a community or communities band together for this power authority or whatever it's called, that even if all of that is done and the choice is there, at an individual level, customer level, you will still have that choice. You can choose to continue to be served the same way you are now, or to utilize this new authority with a different power source. If I'm saying it right, Leslie, and you can correct me.
I thought that was perfect. Thank you, Councilwoman Tracy. Yes. Carol, I don't know if that helps, but I'm happy to come back, either answer more now or come back to it later.
No, that's fine. I understand a little clearer now. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. I'm so glad you asked it. Thank you. I think we've been here. This is one of the reasons my concerns about Xcel. This is a graph. We keep track of Xcel's financials from their Securities Exchange Commission filing. One of our nice, amazing members, a guy named Paul Cullen, actually does the graphs. It's not that hard, but he's nice enough to just do them. The blue line is Xcel's sales over the last close to 20 years. You can see they're basically flat. And in the time that I've been doing this work, their profits have tripled. And, I've had a seat that's up close and personal, and it is not pretty how they've managed to do that, but no other business, I think, could do that. And even though our rates are better than your rates, they're still way too high I'm very anxious to have some price discipline and some market forces at work. Yeah, Steve, go.
Yeah, if you go back, just to clarify on that graph, the blue line uses the left axis, the red line uses the right axis. The blue line indicates how much energy is being produced, and the red line shows how much profits they're making from that. And you can see that the red line goes up way faster than the blue. They're basically making more money while producing very little more energy.
Excellent. Thanks for that perfect clarification. I really appreciate it, Steve. I don't want to spend too much time on Excel. I just want to give people a sense of why it is that I am also very interested in market forces, unleashing innovation, all that stuff. This has been my life for the last close to 20 years of my life. I've been in many, many Excel dockets, but these are all the rate increases that I have followed, and many of them been a full participant in. And while their sales have stayed flat, they are receiving 726 million more per year in revenue. Actually, that last 182 will take a couple of years to go in, but it's way over 600 million more in revenue than they used to receive. You can always find a good reason to spend money. Go to the grocery store and plan to spend 50, and chances are you'll spend 75 unless you're really disciplined. And so Excel's always spending money and then asking us to pay for it. So that's the short version of what's been a very long and painful experience for me watching all of this happen. Now I want to explain, unless there's any questions, I want to explain why I'm so confident that this can work in Colorado if we get the right kind of enabling legislation, to kind of go back to Doug's questions. On the left side of this screen are wind and solar projects that were bid into Excel. We don't know exactly where they all are, but they're virtually all in Colorado. There may be a couple in Wyoming, but they're virtually all in Colorado. So this is the same pool of bids that a community like Canyon City or a joint authority or Pueblo or wherever it is could tap into. I've put a green circle around the median price. That means half the bids are lower and half are higher. They're expressed in dollars per megawatt hour, so you divide them by 10. So $19.30 a megawatt hour for wind as a median price. Half the projects were lower than that. That comes out to 1.93 cents a kilowatt hour. And now we might go down to, let's go down to solar, $30.96 a megawatt hour. That divided by 10, you'll get 3.1 cents a kilowatt hour. And these are 2018 prices. Some of them gone up, some of them gone down, but we can easily say they're all below $40 a megawatt hour. And when you add up the number of megawatts in the column that says project megawatts, and you just look at the projects that are wind and solar and storage, that's over 50,000 megawatts. Excel's system at peak is it's about 7,500 megawatts. Now, a megawatt of wind and a megawatt of solar is not the same thing as a megawatt of reliable coal and reliable natural gas. And we have both our coal and gas plants going offline regularly. We know that from discovery at the commission. But a megawatt of wind and megawatt solar is not the same. The sun doesn't shine at night. So you can't do a one-to-one comparison here, but you can mix and match because the sun shines during the day and the wind tends to blow more at night, and you can put in storage. And that's the interesting puzzle that a whole lot of really smart young people are busy solving for us. And it's why Excel feels confident they can go above 80% renewable with, too many rate increases for my taste, but not an outrageous number. So that's 50,000 megawatts. I forgot to check Canyon City's max peak demand, but it's something not very big, frankly. Maybe 100 or 150 megawatts. I don't know what your peak demand is. Maybe John will know. When Excel looked at these bids, the red bar is what they took. And the blue bar, I arbitrarily threw out half the bids and said half of those bids are bad. So the blue bar is 1/2 of the bids, and the red bar is what Excel took. So that means, as just thinking in economic terms, there's a whole lot of low cost wind, solar, and storage in Colorado ready to go. And it's costing, let's call it 2 to 3, maybe 4 cents a kilowatt hour if you add good storage in. 4 cents to produce, and you're paying 16 cents. And utilities have always told us that the generation part is 60 plus % of the cost of the product. So let's just say I'm not such a business person, but clearly Steve is, with 4 startups and then as the CEO. Steve and I and, I don't know, Carol or whatever decide to start a little energy company, we say, well, we'll produce it for 3 or 4 cents a kilowatt hour and send it to you, sell it to you for 8. And we'll still make a bundle of money because we're selling it to you for twice as much as it's costing us. Like, oh, and then you got a few overhead costs and transmission and delivery and everything, but still. And, somebody else says, well, I'll sell it to you for 7.5. And somebody else says, I'll sell it to you for 7. Or under the current system, if somebody came and said they'd sell it to you for 12, you'd be thrilled. And they'd still make a lot of money. And this is, from my point of view, the best answer I can give to Doug's question, which is we have an abundance of supply. It's lower cost than what you're paying and what I'm paying, but we can't get it to your community or my community because we don't have a legal system that allows it. The legal system we have was built in the beginning of the last century. There were reasons they did it. I say a century later, it's probably time to at least provide the choice for a different system. Let me stop there. There's questions on this slide.
Yeah, let me also just point out though that, it's not a someday, they're already out there producing electricity at low rates. And unfortunately, Canyon City, like Boulder, has a wall around it. You can't bring it in. And it's just artificial. It's not that they couldn't be brought in. It's just that it's legally prevented from being brought in. So it's like they're waiting at the gate. I mean, it's not like, well, someday, they'll come up with other suppliers. No, they're already out there. They're waiting at the gate. You open the gate, in it comes.
That's a great analogy, Steve. Thank you. And you're seeing that because you've already had, San Isabel and Core Electric and, come to you and say, listen, we'd like to provide you. And they can't legally, but they are waiting at the gate. And what they need to provide, again, to answer Doug's question, they need to provide a reliable supply. And that means at this point, they're going to have some fossil fuels in that mix. But they're very likely to have a pretty high percentage of renewables because the renewables are cheaper. But then it's a matter of mixing and matching and backing up and managing demand, which is something we need to do a lot better job of. And we can do it. And that's why you've had people knocking at your door, just like Steve said, they're waiting at the gate, but we can't do it until we get a legal system that allows it. Yeah, Councilwoman Tracy.
Yeah, I would say probably too that the wholesalers, like we've had discussions in Canyon City with one wholesaler, and I have to assume it's kind of a similar thing, that they're developing access to all kinds of sources of power that are operating out there in the market. But again, because of these legal restrictions in Colorado, it's not so easy for them to come into a community that's served by an IOU and truly offer, what they have. But there's a market out there of all of this power that you're referring to that's being generated in a variety of ways by a variety of entities.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's absolutely true, Councilwoman Tracy. And I am not an attorney. So obviously you want to have these legal discussions, but it's my belief and understanding that unless we get new law in Colorado, unless we enable it, there will be a legal wall around Canyon City as well as around every other community. And the market can't work. They're at the gate, but they can't come in unless we provide that option. And again, if a community doesn't want to let them in, nothing in the state law would force them to allow them in, but it would give you the option to allow them in. And the important thing is that at the very least, that gives you more leverage in your negotiations with your current provider. Because right now, most communities have virtually no leverage. What are you going to say? If you don't, give me a better product, I'm going to what? You don't have any choice. You can't divorce them. So, any other questions on this slide? It's, to me, fundamental to why this system, why I'm so confident it can work. Whether it'll work or not, it will depend on whether we can open up the gates and allow it to work, to use Steve's great analogy.
May I ask, just out of curiosity, Leslie, I'm just a little confused. So this slide, are you telling me that this energy is out there today and it's just not being utilized? Is that what you're saying? Because you said it, we have all this excess power. Like,
No, no,
I'm just trying.
that's, these are, that's, and could, who was that was speaking? Could I ask?
It's John. I'm sorry. I'm just trying. It's John B. Hill.
Yeah, very good. Excellent question, John. And I think you know, but I'm glad you asked it because I wasn't clear about it. These are projects that are what we call wrench ready generally. They're projects that have been submitted to Excel as part of their request for proposals. And in order to submit, the bidder often has to pay, it used to be $10,000. I'm not sure what it is now, but you have to pay basically a bidding fee to have Excel look at your project. And so you don't usually submit a project unless it's well down the road. You have, in a sense, what they call, you know, control of the land. You have an agreement with the rancher or whoever. You can put this project there. You've worked with the permitting officials. You're pretty sure you can get it permitted. These are wrench ready and most generally can be up and running in about 24, sometimes 36 months. So no, these are not built, but they are, to use Steve's term, they're at the gate. They're ready to go. They just need to be able to sell to someone. And not only are our utilities monopolies, they're the only people that can sell to us. They're also what's called a monopsony. They're the only buyer for the most part. And I'm about to show you a few exceptions, but for the most part, if you're, you know, in Excel's case, if Excel isn't buying, you aren't selling. You can't then kind of go around the back door and go to Boulder or Canyon City or Pueblo or, you know, Alamosa or any other place and say, listen, I could build you wind and solar for this, that, and the other thing and deliver it to you for this, that, and the other thing. They can say it, but they can't do it until we create that legal option. So yeah, good question. These are not projects that are up and running, but projects that are very, I threw out half of them in the blue bar and said half of them are bad. That was arbitrary. But even when, if we assume half of these projects are bad, there's still tens of thousands of megawatts ready to go. And other questions, but that was a great clarifying question, John. Thank you.
May I ask just one more follow-up question?
Yeah.
Do you know if those are still viable projects? The reason I ask is because they were, you know, but things have changed.
Yeah, right. No, we don't know what percentage of these are viable. This was from Excel's request for proposals in the last resource plan. The responses came in late 2017, and then there was a tariff put on the solar panels under the Trump administration. So they asked all the bidders to refresh their bids to see like how much of an impact is that going to have. It had, you know, in the pennies effect for the most part. I think the original wind medium price was 1910 and then it went to 1930, but I would have to check that. We don't know because now it's 3 and 4 years later. We've had a pandemic, there are supply chain issues. We've got issues around China and solar panels. There's a war brewing, right? You know, so no, we won't know, but Excel will be going to bid, we believe, maybe later this year or early next year, and we should have the next round in what's called the 30-day report, which I expect in kind of the second quarter, March, April, May kind of time frame next year, if not that, soon after that. And we'll get the next snapshot. But with 50,000 megawatts, you could throw out half of them. You could throw out 2/3 of them and you'd still have more than virtually everyone needs, and certainly more than Canyon City needs. John, do you happen to know the peak demand for Canyon City?
I don't know specifically for Canyon City, no.
Yeah, Boulder, which is, we have about 100,000 people and a couple of big companies. Our peak demand is about 250 megawatts. And so Canyon City is going to be something way under that. My guess is probably under 50 megawatts. I don't know. Maybe Kathy knows that answer. But
It's ballpark.
Yeah, I'd say 50s.
Yeah, that's what I think we've heard.
yeah, okay. Something way under 100. So if we've got 5,000 megawatts and you need 100, there's plenty of, it's Colorado. The wind blows like crazy. Do I need to tell you? And the sun shines a lot. I don't think I need to tell you that. So, and these projects are typically ready to go in 24 to 36 months. Now life happens and, you know, sometimes like they did out in Delta, they had to add, I think it was goats or sheep. Now I forget which one. They had to add goats or sheep to their solar project to get it through their county commission. But, you know,
The weeds.
this is not like a coal plant that takes 10 years, you know, close to 10 years to build, 7 years to build. Very good. Other questions here? There, you know that. I think you actually know this, but I wanted to kind of assemble it. There are communities in Colorado, each one for a different reason, that have been able to do what's called go to market. And I've listed, and New Mexico, I've included Kit Carson and Raton from New Mexico. And a lot of these deals have been done with Guzman. We'll talk a little bit about the Fountain deal, and then I want to come back and talk about the Boulder RFIP. We don't request for indicative pricing. We don't have a deal because we've got that wall around our city. And it's not just Guzman, as you will soon see. And I know you've been in discussions with Guzman, so I don't think I need to belabor this. And I thought about putting all the references, because I usually try to have all the references on my slides. It got too busy, so I just put this slide in, but all you have to do is search Guzman and those communities. And I wanted, you probably know about Fountain, but Guzman is paying Fountain now for the privilege of becoming their provider in 2027. And that goes to that thing where if you can produce it for 2, 3, 4 cents a kilowatt hour, if you can sell it for something under 16, you still have a lot of money left over. And you can do what I consider not exactly crazy things, but you can afford to pay a community for 6 or 7 years ahead of time in order to have the contractual right to serve them in 2027. Because Guzman knows that they're not the only ones that can figure out that if you can produce it for 2, 3, 4 cents a kilowatt hour and sell it for something under 16 cents a kilowatt hour, there's room for improvement there. And they know that competition is coming. So, they're trying to tie up market share, which is exactly what, in my mind, should be happening. But I found the Fountain deal quite stunning. But it's not just Guzman. Boulder went out for what's called a request for indicative pricing, RFIP, late 2018. Now, this is not final contractual negotiations. So, there's a little slop in here for sure. But still, we could see that if we could open up those gates that Steve talked about, whereas if we were going to go to Xcel, their projection was 53% renewable by 2024. I don't think they might be there, but I don't know. We'll find out. But whatever, 123 odd million. There were providers, and the providers that were willing to have their names put out there, because it's a little hard to put them out, because when you put your name out, Xcel, you've got a target on your back from the Xcels and Black Hills of the world. Guzman has that target. These other folks didn't necessarily want to have that target, but they agreed to put their name in public. And you can see, just as you have found, that there's more than one entity that would like to serve Canyon City. You're a desirable community. I put the red arrow by the 100% by 2030, which would have saved us about 30 million. I actually was most interested in the day one high renewables, 80% renewable by 2024. We would save about 40 million a year in our electricity prices. Now, even if you build in some slop into this, okay, when you actually negotiate, maybe it becomes 93. It's still a much better deal. And it's not as powerful as Guzman has become in this kind of niche market. They are not the only ones out there, and you've experienced that also. So I have just a couple more slides and then we'll move on. A lot of times the argument is made for CCAs through California. The green ones, there are community choice aggregation entities. They call it CCA in California. It's been converted into community choice energy in Colorado. But the aggregation is because you often aggregate several communities. In our case, if Boulder was going to do it, maybe we think about Louisville or Lafayette, or if Canyon City and Pueblo or whatever aggregation ends up making sense in your area. The green are all CCAs that are up and running. The yellow, orange, whatever color that is, they're on their way. They've submitted a plan, an implementation plan to the California, the equivalent of the PUC. And then the grays are the ones that are considering, and some communities consider and go, no. And it's just like anything. There's early adopters, and, like I was slow to get a microwave because I was like, what's with a microwave? Just put a pot on the stove. And so, there's going to be early adopters and slower adopters, and we're seeing that in California, but lots of early adopters. This is why the IOUs really don't like community choice, because once it gets up and running, you can see that after Marin Clean Energy kind of figured it out, it took a while, but over the last 6 or 7 years, if you squint at the names, those are all what we might call communities or joint power authorities. And they are now producing that meant in this case gigawatt hours of electricity in California and serving their customers under that community choice, that middle model that we talked about with Carol. And they have opt-out. So neighbor A might be under community choice and neighbor B might be under, let's call it Pacific Gas and Electric or whatever, San Diego Gas and Electric. And it's really just a billing thing. And you decide kind of where you want to spend your dollars, Then I wanted to just show you this, and this also serves as a bit of an answer to Carol's question. Let's start with this middle column, the PG&E column, 31% renewable. If you were to be an average customer at PG&E, $186, and of that, this was appalling to me, and this has gone up so much. The delivery charges, which is what PG&E controls, is $105. It used to be like 70 and 80 when you look back on these rate charts. And regardless of what option you have, everyone has that delivery charge. But when it comes to the energy charge, which was kind of the top box in that slide that we looked at, you can see for what's called Marin Clean Energy, Marin County, north of San Francisco, and that kind of peninsula above San Francisco, their energy charge for 60% renewables is $57 and change. PG&E for 31% renewable is $80 and change. If you wanted to get to 100% renewable because you are concerned about whatever, you could still get that energy for less than you can get it from PG&E. If you want all of your electricity to come from local solar because you love solar and you want to keep this energy close to home so it doesn't have to go across the big transmission lines for so far, and you just have a deep belief in it, that is also lower cost energy. Then there's what we might call the exit fee. In California, it's called the PCIA plus a few other charges. But anyways, you can see that the total bill is, unless you go 100% local solar, if you either have the light green, 60% renewable, or the 100% green, both of those are lower than PG&E. And it's broken down into these different parts that correspond kind of to those blocks that we looked at in the earlier slide. And I think, other than reminding you about the PUC hearing on October 18th, inviting your participation as we kind of rough out enabling legislation and request your help talking to your friends, your neighbors, your elected officials. I think that's all I have to say. I want to thank you so much for your patience and for your attention and for your excellent questions. And I'm available to answer more questions, as is Steve, and I see at least one hand.
Yeah, my name is Kirk, and the last slide that you had talked about the rates, and it's my understanding that basically your rate is a PUC rate formula that we are using right now, but it includes transmission, distribution, and generation. And I presume that what you're talking about, the rate that, or the fee that you paid, would have been determined for transmission and distribution. Is that correct? And who determines that? Does the PUC help determine that?
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a good question. And this is my best answer. And I reserve the right to get smarter about it. But transmission is usually managed, the rates are set usually at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And there's something called the Open Access Transmission Tariff. The FERC at the federal level, in so many words, said about 20 years ago, 25 years ago now, said in so many sense, utilities have this monopoly on the transmission lines, but we need to have those transmission lines be available to other entities that want to get electrons from here to there. And so they developed this system, which gets, the acronym is an OAT, an Open Access Transmission Tariff, that to the best of my knowledge is set by FERC. And it, like for example, Xcel, which owns a lot of transmission lines, they have two parts of Xcel. One part manages the transmission system. And in theory, they're not supposed to give any preferential treatment to Xcel that serves people like Steve and me, because their transmission tariff is supposed to be an open access for anybody that wants to ship electrons across those transmission lines. And then the charge for the distribution system would generally be determined with, from my experience, Kirk, at the Public Utilities Commission, because my experience is the Colorado PUC oversees Xcel's distribution system and their expenses. So I believe it's a combination of that federal, the OAT that's set under the FERC, and the distribution system charge, which would be determined by the PUC. And it's an
Yeah,
excellent.
I have one follow-up question on that. With the PUC rate formula that we're currently operating under, it allows the utility to have a rate base. And that the rate base with the dollar amount that they have invested in their long-term assets, such as the Pueblo PAGS plant and transmission lines. Is the exit fee, is that part of the rate? Would that be compensating for the rate base that they're not going to be able to collect?
Stranded assets, basically.
Yeah, stranded assets.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And one of the key things is to try to come up with a fair exit fee. The way the California legislation was written, it wasn't very tight. And so PG&E keeps throwing things into the bucket that then gets incorporated into the exit fee, which in California is called the PCIA, Power Charge Indifference Assessment, something like that. It might not be quite right, but it's close. So yeah, those stranded assets go down into what has been called PG&E fees, might be called an exit fee. And it's for, like in your case, Black Hills could say, well, we invested in the PAGS plant, and now if you're going to leave us, you need to pay us. And this is part, Kirk, of what we'll be working to do, is to find a way to write legislation that provides a fair exit fee to Black Hills or Xcel, but it's a fair exit fee, not a fee that they can use as a bludgeon against communities that want to exit. And so that's going to be part of that, what I call sausage making down at the Capitol. And certainly, you know, I know you've spent a lot of time looking at all this. I've seen some of your work, and thank you for that. We'd love your help and engagement on thinking about that.
But I do think that that's a very, very important component of this whole thing is the rate base. And actually, you're talking about how that whole rate formula that the PUC uses really is outdated, but that's another issue.
I'm with you on all of that, Kirk, for sure. That's why I showed that slide with all the red proceedings and all the rate increases. It's a big problem, and it's something I would love to talk with you and anybody else with offline. You know, obviously we want our utilities to be financially healthy, but there's a question of where's that right line and what incentive do they have to make a lot of large capital expenditures, like a big $1 billion coal plant in Pueblo that they've been profiting from and which hasn't been working well and is the wrong resource for this century, something I've spent, you know, basically 20 years of my life on. People now realize, you know what, you were right. And I've had everybody, including the very top people in Xcel, tell me you were right. And that's been a little gratifying. In the meantime, we spent $1 billion. They've made a lot of profits off it. Now they want their customers to pay it all off to basically socialize the risks. And don't get me going, because you might be able to tell this is something I feel deeply about. So thank you,
I
Kirk.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because that's just, with the situation we're in, that's going to be a big issue.
Yep, it is a big issue everywhere. Try having me. Excel has spent close to $2 billion on coal in the last 15 years, not including the cost of coal and O&M. $2 billion that's gone into the rate base on coal. And we now have about $1 billion stranded. And they know it's stranded because they just agreed to that it was stranded in the settlement agreement at the PUC. So don't get me going. But we're in
Another
agreement.
question from,
Yes, Leslie, this is Doug again. On the customer choice. Are the customers allowed to switch back and forth?
That's an excellent question, Doug. And the question is can you just well, this year I want this and next year I want that. And that's part of what I think will be addressed in enabling legislation is kind of the rate of what we might call churn. And I think I'll just stop there because I'm not an expert, but yeah, you want to have some limits on how often you can jump back and forth. That certainly happens in a lot of Excel's programs, whether it's the saver switch on your air conditioning or whether it's what's called the interruptible service option credit, ISOC. You can only jump back and forth at certain intervals, or you might think of, the Medicare type thing, your healthcare provider. There are certain windows and frequencies, and whether those are set in legislation or whether they're set in PUC rules, I believe there will be the ability to, frankly, to jump back and forth, but only at certain frequencies and perhaps with certain payments, like if you want to jump back, that's fine, but you need to pay us whatever, some amount of money because we got to do all the paperwork and yada, yada. So that's an excellent question. Again, partly that would be in legislation and part of it might be in PUC rules.
Okay, I have another question. You talked about opening the gates, but then you said it would probably be between 24 and 36 months to get the infrastructure completed on the renewables. Okay, so let's say Canyon City has shot a price but it's not going to be ready for 3 years. We all know there's cost increases for numerous different reasons. So the community agreed to this changeover at a certain time, and it's not going to be ready for 3 years. How are price increases going to be affected in the bill to the consumer?
Yeah, again, a great question, John. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm sorry, Doug. That's a great question. Sorry. It's hard not being in the same room. I apologize. So typically let's say a community decides to do community choice.
Yes.
Then they submit submitted an implementation plan to the PUC that says we're going to do this, that, and the other thing, and here's how we're making sure we have resource adequacy and all that sort of thing. We've got firm power, not just, flaky power, what we might call flaky power, when sun shines and wind blows. Then once the PUC approves the implementation plan, they do a request for proposals. A whole lot of people that probably bid into Excel are going to bid into yours. Your team, city staff and citizens, would review those proposals, do due diligence, choose the ones that you think are both the lowest price and the most solid, right? This isn't just some flaky bid from somebody. Then that bid typically is going to have a price scale. I don't think that's quite the right word, but a price schedule. You're going to pay this much in 2027 and this much in 2028 and 29 and 30 and on out. And the thing about wind and solar is once it's built, it's very low operating costs, of course. So what a lot of communities have liked is that, let's say you're negotiating a contract in 2027 or 28, somewhere in there. You're going to have very likely very low and stable, importantly stable prices, probably for 10 to 20 years. And communities that have gone to market are just like, I know what my electricity is going to cost in 2039. And you certainly don't know that with Black Hills. And so it's built into the answer to your question would be built into the contract. And the entity that's building that project, they're the ones that have to look at the risk of increasing prices and both consider that risk to their project and consider that they're in an extremely competitive environment. Because let's say you want 75 or 100 megawatts or maybe even 150, there's thousands of megawatts of projects that'll be bidding. So they want your business, but they also don't want to underbid, because then if prices go up, they're going to be in trouble. And so that's the thing about markets, right? That's one reason I'm so interested in markets, because instead of consumers bearing all the risk all the time, you start to have the developers having to think about this, and you've got that, what we might call price discipline, from being in that highly competitive market that I talked about, with tens of thousands of megawatts of wind and solar in Colorado, ready to go at very low prices.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Thanks.
Are there other questions in the room? I still see a hand up, but that might be just left over. Looks like not. Leslie and Steve Whitaker, is there anything you want to say in addition? This has been a wonderful discussion and a great back and forth with all the questions. How do we wrap up?
Other than for anybody that thinks choice might be useful in your negotiations with Black Hills, you don't have to choose choice, right? You just have to have the option of choice. And I would say that there's every reason to believe that having the option of choice will strengthen your hand with Black Hills around the rate issue. And so we'd be very grateful for help, any help, and showing up on October 18th at 4 p.m. The information will be in the calendar for the PUC in the lower right corner of the PUC webpage. And we will be sending out notices once we get a little more information from the Utilities Commission. Certainly Councilwoman Tracy will get those notices. But other than that, I just want to thank you all. I want to thank you both for your time today, but really for the hard work you've put in. This is, as none of us thought we were going to be doing this, I think 15 years ago. Oh, you're going to become an expert on whatever, right? Except for maybe Kathy, who's been doing it forever.
Yeah, Kathy.
Yeah. So like, I don't want to know everything there is to know about coal, that's for sure. And I don't know, but you know a lot. So Steve, you want to wrap it up for us?
Yeah. I'd just like to come back to what I know most about, and that is competition and innovation. Having worked in technology, there's really a bright future ahead for energy, but it only will be released if there's a competitive and open marketplace. It's, if you look at what happened to the telecommunications industry, a vital industry in the United States, and what happened in the 80s and 90s, what we have now would never have been possible under a regulated monopoly environment. The Bell was great. They did what they did. That was great, but it wasn't what could be done. And that's the same thing as is now. It's, what we have is really a fantastic electrical grid system, but it isn't what it could be. And that is the future. And what we're looking at is the future. And it is one of the most vital industries to the United States. And a monopoly, it's just not the American way.
Great. Well, thanks so much to both of you. This has really been helpful, not only because it's been quite a while since the committee has talked about the potential for community choice energy, but this has just filled in a lot of gaps, at least in my understanding, and I'll bet a few others too. This is just good to know, and it is so timely too because of where we are. And I know at the very least we'll want to stay in touch in terms of the development of potentially enabling legislation. And of course, we're anxious to see what the PUC reports out in December too. I see another hand in the room, right?
That's me. I'm just curious if we could get a copy of the slide presentation.
Yeah.
please.
that would be really helpful.
Yes, am I? Yes, thank you so much. What I need to do just a little work because I always have about 60 slides and show you 20 or 30. And I need to take off the picture of the Monopoly game. I'm pretty sure it's not copyrighted, but you have to be careful about that. So
Sure.
I'm pretty much tied up today, but I will get a copy to Councilwoman Tracy, but it may take a little while.
Okay,
But absolutely happy to have you use the slides to the extent that they're useful. Sometimes I print them out and carry them in a little plastic cover, and then I talk to the person in the coffee shop or whoever I'm going to talk to, or my council people or my legislators or whoever. And really, really welcome your help doing that. Welcome your questions because your questions help us think about it better. And I really appreciate the questions were awesome today. Thank you. And yes, absolutely. And keep in touch. There won't be the picture of the Monopoly game, but maybe I'm the only one who remembers what it was like to play Monopoly. with my own friends.
no,
Oh, got the game.
we're all
So,
there.
Got the Denver
I
version.
think any other questions, feel free to send them through Councilwoman Tracy. And, Councilwoman Tracy, just please be persistent. As you know, we work in have our fingers in a lot of pots.
Right.
But I think other than that, if I'm happy to answer more questions, but otherwise I think Steve and I will sign out so you can have a little time to yourselves.
Okay, thanks.
Does that
Anything
sound
else?
right?
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
very
very
Sounds
much.
much.
great.
Very helpful.
Yeah. Thanks again for being with us
Wherever
and
I-
we'll stay in touch. Thanks so much, both of you.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
You too. Bye. Okay.
Well, John, you should feel good that it was mostly the goddamn XL Energy. that threw the ropes today.
Exactly. Well,
Oh,
yeah,
gosh.
and clearly Leslie's been involved with that side of things for a long time and more
Yeah,
knowledgeable
probably.
about it than I, and the rate cases and so forth. But yeah, we can keep thinking, if we come up with questions that we didn't think of for her today, I can certainly pass that along to her. And I'm guessing we'll stay in touch with her and whoever else is working on the legislation, which will take some months, I would guess, to put together the draft. And I don't know, I forgot to ask her if they already have legislators who are planning to sponsor that, or maybe it's too early to know that. But we'll stay in touch with her on all of that. Any just kind of pending thoughts on that? Anything else we need to say regarding that presentation or ask about?
I thought it was very good in the sense that it really brought the community choice option more into play for me as far as totally understanding it and so forth. I mean, of
Right.
course, I'll have, from my perspective, that was the other side, and that's great. And I think there is some great opportunities to pursue it, but it's a long way off, and I'm not sure that we're going to be able to pull that into our summation of what we end up doing, but it's definitely, I think it's something good, and just so it's long enough that I can continue my pension for another 20 years, and we got to keep public service company and XL Energy in play.
Well,
So-
yeah, we certainly don't want to negatively impact retirees.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Oh.
it might be, well, it does sound like whoever's working on that potential legislation, I think they are anticipating trying to do something in the next session, starting in early 2023. But what that will look like and what the process, I mean, it may be like a lot of things. It may not get through the process this coming year. Maybe it'll take another year past that or two or whatever. And as so many things, I think the devil is in the details on how this works. But the other side of it is we can learn from the things that worked in California, didn't work in California, or any other state that's tried this. It's not just there. So it's helpful just to know where they are in the process and to kind of mark our calendars for when that PUC report comes out in December. See what
I was
they
gonna
come up
give-
with.
So I was just gonna give Doug a quick I did time in Texas. I was in Lubbock, Texas when
Did time
public
in-
service, when public service merged with Southwestern Public Service. I purposely, volunteered in a sense. That was one of the things I applied for and I got it. If I hadn't got it, I'd have been out the door. But what I was saying is I went down there because it was at the time when they were talking about doing what the rest of Texas did as far as the open market.
Mhm.
And in Lubbock, you went down the alley, you had Southwestern Public Service and you had Lubbock Power and Light. It was municipal and SPS right there in the same alleyway. And all it took was a frickin' phone call to change.
Mhm.
You had churn and all it mattered is where did the light get last night? Did it hit a LPS group or did it hit a Southwestern Public Service transmission line or distribution? And so
Mhm.
it was interesting and
So it really was a parallel,
it was
physically parallel.
physically, you had
Two
That's
different
just
sets.
two or two sets of distribution poles, transformers, the whole bit.
Right.
And XL, well, it wasn't XL then, but it was, whatever the hell we were, Southwestern Public. Yeah. It was just a phone call and you had the gas down the middle and I can't even remember who the supplier was there, but it was an interesting scenario. About
Mhm.
3 years after I left, came back to God's country, it basically became, XL said, this is ridiculous. And I don't even know if we were XL at the time, but we gave all of the distribution back to LP&L. LP&L, that's who it was. And so it's just interesting. And of course, the commercials were just, oh, buy locally. Well,
Political
so-
all year long, right?
yeah, well, what was so ironic is that LP&L received 90% of their electricity from Southwestern Public Service. And yet we were still trying to do our own distribution. So it was confusing as hell. So anyway, I'm just giving you that
Yeah.
as a, we don't want anything like that. That's for
No,
sure.
and that is not what's being considered here at all.
Not at all, no,
No.
but just to tell you that
Yeah.
that was allowed and that will never be allowed, I'm sure, ever
Well,
again.
and that was my question. If you've got a choice and this one's 25% lower than this one, it's like, oh, no, I believe in fossil fuels, so I'm gonna go with this guy. I
Yeah.
mean.
Yeah, that's the way
seriously?
the parts
Why
of
would you do
Texas,
that?
I think parts of the East Coast did that and so forth. And luckily, the utilities had the option to opt in or opt out as far as becoming that type of
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
And thank God, from my perspective, working for them, XL said, no, we're gonna go ahead and just maintain this. You know, we're gonna do all three, transmission, distribution and whatever. So it's
Hmm.
interesting.
Yeah,
But
it
that
is
doesn't
all.
mean we're the cheapest and we sure as hell, that was an interesting graph to see the
Mhm.
supply versus
Mhm.
profit and that. of course,
Yeah,
and I don't know if he was showing just Colorado profit or if he was showing Colorado. What you have to compare would be the amount of energy over all 8 states versus the corporate profit too.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure, and I should ask that, but it just
Well,
came
that's
to me.
Excel,
yeah. When I get the slides from her, I can certainly follow up with that question for
And I'm
her.
not questioning it necessarily, but it does make me feel a little disappointed if that's true, because I took great pride with the company I worked for.
Yeah, well, we know it's all very complex and, just the way it works in Colorado with the IOUs. And we know it's in a sense simpler with the municipal utilities and with rural electric co-ops, just because it isn't this regulated system. But it is complex, and the whole thing is complex. So
Well,
anyway,
and of course-
great discussion.
Say, Emily,
Yeah.
I'm just thinking that one of the functions of the committee here is to look at options.
Mhm.
And personally, I think that this represents a potential new option, at least an option for us to look at. And what was the committee going to get some input on the 18th of October in reference to this with the PUC, or how would that work? Of at least the PUC knowing that, and I'm speaking for myself, I'm not speaking for the committee, But if the committee would want to at least look at this option and say that we were interested in it, you know, how do we go about
Right.
that?
That's where we take it up to CML or through CML is because they would act as our lobbyist. And also, you know, and we also are, I don't think this particular one is not the one we've intervened in.
Right.
But this would be a follow through for us to, CML will have, I'm sure, lobbyists at that meeting or at least online. It might be good for us to say, hey.
To at
let
least
'em know-
connect with them. Yeah.
Let them know this is something that,
Yeah, and most hearings, is this just, is
You
there
can
a
zoom
comment period then after, do you
not,
suppose?
no,
There wouldn't be. a
not
comment
for us
period?
general folk, I don't think.
Well, no, I mean, as a, almost like it's an intervener like we did with PUC. I don't know if there's those opportunities, but.
Well, I
Or
think it sounded
copy.
like,
Is that
and
what-
I can find out more information about October
you're
18th.
trying-
It
Think
sounded
would
like it
probably-
was, sorry, it sounded like it was just a public hearing to take input from the public, but I could be wrong on that.
Well, maybe if it
Well-
is, then yeah, we could.
Yeah, maybe there's information on the PUC website.
Right. I'll see what
about
I can find
what they
out.
want.
Okay,
Yeah,
Jacqueline Turi at CML would be the lobbyist that assigned. She's the one that specializes on the energy side.
Utility, yeah. So we can, do you want me to, I can just send her an email just to see
sure,
if they're doing anything on the CML side regarding this. So I'll do that.
that'd be great.
I
Yeah.
think From what I've heard, both from you folks and from Leslie. If you're interested, as she ended, if you're interested in having the option explored and developed, not that you're gonna vote here to it. To commit to,
Right,
if it's there, then we'll do it.
no,
But if you want the option developed legislatively. And through the PUC, I would say that you probably want to, that's something that you want to voice yourself. You don't necessarily have to go through a Colorado Municipal League. You could,
Right.
one of you folks, maybe you, since you're the one who's done the most research on all of this, and the reports, Kurt, you could just say the committee is interested in seeing the option further developed. I think
Yeah.
that's what Leslie was hoping that this group would do, if
Sure.
you see the value
Mhm.
in doing so.
it wouldn't hurt to have both the CML and us as individuals do it, so I could get.
Right.
Something willing to do that.
And maybe we can check in the interim period and talk about that more at the next meeting.
Right.
Is that still gonna be a week or
Yeah,
9
yeah.
days,
The
Or is
next
that too
meeting
late?
is October 10th.
or is that too late to get information in?
Oh,
well,
think
that's
you
why
do
I
it
think we
online,
need
yeah.
to check on the website and
Yeah.
see what their rules and, their
Process.
process.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be hitting the road pretty quick, but either tonight or tomorrow morning, I'll take a look at that for sure.
Okay, because
Okay,
you're back
thank
in
you.
town then tomorrow.
I'll be back in Canyon on Wednesday morning, but I'll
Okay.
be in Colorado tonight, so.
Okay,
So anything else on that topic? I do think she did a really good job, in my opinion, of really explaining it in a way that it's like, oh, okay, I get it, I get it. Because
Big
it's not simple.
yeah.
I don't have any other new business other than, as I think I mentioned in an email, we've tentatively scheduled Dr. David Munoz for November 14th. The earlier dates didn't work for him. And he's involved, I believe, I don't know all the detail, he's involved with a nonprofit in the Taos, New Mexico area that has worked with the Kit Carson Electric transition that they've gone through, where they, as I recall, they got out of their contract early with Tri-State, and the community wanted to move more quickly to renewables. So, but he's going to be able to address just kind of what that experience has been, which I think will be just one more bit of information for us to have a little more detailed understanding of what that process has been and how they've been pleased with it. And certainly Steve Andrews has written the the one pager case study and updated that from time to time in regard to Kit Carson. So refer back to that for sure, and you'll get a sense of what we'll be talking more about on November 14th. And Ryan, I don't have any other information from John Hamrick as far as any other pending agenda items, like for the next meeting or any others coming up. Do you have anything from John?
I don't think I do. I think I've got the same affiliate you do.
Okay,
Okay. And is there anything, while I'm asking you, is there anything just from the city government that we should be updated on? Anything we need to know at this point?
I don't believe so.
Okay,
Okay.
great.
Steve's got a question. Steve's got a question.
Citizen request to speak,
Oh.
item number 4.
Anyone? Yes, Steve? I can't
Yeah.
see you, but I hear you.
I essentially, obviously, in the late August meeting, we had the back and forth on solar. After John said solar's unreliable, and we had a long discussion here, and I was one of the deliverers of the opposite opinion. And I sent you all a little 3-page summary of why solar is reliable and how it compares certainly to 2 power plants that were notably conventional. And well, actually, the nuke up in Fort Lupton was not conventional. It was a high temperature gas
Yeah.
reactor. It was the
Fort
first
St.
of a
Vrain,
kind.
yeah.
First.
Oh, yeah, we went all out and tried something new.
Yeah, that
That
was,
was just what I was employed, was that boondoggle.
anyway, you know, in the world of reliability, I sent along that 3-pager. I sent a follow-up this morning. I encourage people to look at that, the link, because the link, if you like, or if you're at all curious about the PowerPoint that's in there, there's this is hot off the press, this thing I sent you. It is going to be presented on Wednesday in some webinar. So you might be interested in that, and at least take a look at what I sent around
Great.
last night.
We'll do.
Great.
Yeah, thanks.
And
Thanks for
I'm
that.
willing to re-engage with John anytime he wants to go another round.
I'll bring a bell next time.
Anytime he wants to go
That's
another
the one
round.
I missed.
I'm there for it. I'm there for it.
Make sure we have it recorded.
All right, well, thanks for that. Is there anything else? Any other comments, questions, requests, whatever? Not hearing anything.
Thanks, Emily. You did a good
Yeah.
job.
I'm glad,
Thank you,
glad we
Emily.
got it done. Yep, thanks to all of you for being there. And I think this has been good discussion. So we will see you all soon and we'll work on the agenda. Or
right.
maybe just put that in John Hamrick's lap or whatever when he gets back. Hey, John.
Yeah, drive carefully.
Yeah.
Yeah, will do. And thanks, everyone. Thanks, Ryan.